What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Scythe, and we are back again for yet another Berserker damage tutorial video, because after my first damage tutorial video where I talked about the Groundbreaker versus the Grand Slam build that I ended up kind of pioneering, I ended up getting quite a bit of really good feedback from you guys in the comments. More particularly, I want to give a shout out to my man Bro Ash, who ended up leading me on to this other guy who apparently played on the Korean server as the Berserker for a long time, and I don't know if he invented the build or if the build itself was just kind of the more popular one for the Korean server, but we're going to be calling it the Void Slash build. Now, another thing too that I know some of you guys complained about was in the last video I just kind of talked about the damage numbers themselves without actually showing you guys them. So I wanted to take this opportunity not only to show you that in the interface settings you can go to enable personal performance, enable 10 player dungeon meter is for raids. That's obviously coming very soon, so keep that in mind. But this tab right here is very good for tracking all your damage and stuff like that, and I wanted to kind of show like an actual comparison of the different damage numbers that we're going to end up doing. So I'm going to be using a macro. I don't like actually using these, but I'm going to be using it for today's purposes so that we kind of have a better understanding of the absolute best damage that we can have. Now, first of all, we're going to be starting with the Groundbreaker build. And in this video anyways, it's a little bit inconsistent throughout my videos, but we are actually rocking a plus 14 blade. Don't really pay too much attention to how much damage we're doing. Most of all, you gotta pay attention to how much differences, like the difference in the damage that we're going to end up doing. So for the Groundbreaker, this is pretty much the standard build that people use with it, where you're going to be using blood price so that you get a little bit of extra damage. You want to have your Warrior's Instinct maxed out, obviously, because it's giving you extra piercing, and then just the bare minimum and all your other skills. Having Bloodlust is always going to be a good thing just because it gives you more survivability, and you want your Great Sword Mastery. And then, of course, you want to max out your Spin to Win just so that you're doing optimal damage while using Spin to Win. And basically what you're doing with this build is you're just getting to 10 stacks, and then you're just going to be using Groundbreaker over and over and over again while using Blood Price, similarly kind of at the same time, right? So let me actually just swap my buttons right here. Can I get this over here? My buttons are all kind of messed up because the build is a little bit different than what I'm used to. So we're gonna try and let me see if I can get this. Can I hit this guy? Oh, whoops. I ended up casting the stupid blood magic because I'm not used to it, and my little ally's on. So let me disable him and wait for the cooldown of this. Now keep in mind there are a couple different builds that people have actually used with Berserker, including I've seen some people use Earthquake successfully, and Deep Wounds could end up being good if you had a crit build, because of course Deep Wounds is going to end up having a bleed effect, which can end up being good later on, but we don't really have legendary gear or even astral gear in the game at the moment that I'm recording this, so we're just gonna kind of keep these ones in mind. So we're gonna reset our timer, start building up our stacks, which you can see you know, down by our hotbar there, and essentially, like I said, we're pretty much just gonna be building up to 10 stacks with our spin, use our blood magic, and just keep spamming Ground Slam over and over and over again. And you know, that's essentially all you're doing with the Groundbreaker. So it's a pretty boring build. I don't know. I mean, if you just want to have like the laziest damage possible, then by all means go right ahead and do it. I love having Spin to Win just because I love the mobility of that skill. You know, it kind of separates the Berserker from all the other classes, I would say, where you get a lot more mobility rather than being kind of a static just damage character. Which, that said, we're going to be comparing the Ground Slam to the Grand Slam ability, and then there's also going to be the Void Slash, which of course is the absolute best build that I've seen thus far anyways, because it's just absolutely insane. So you can see right now we did roughly 5.1 mil a minute. The reason why you want to gauge it based on minute is because in order to be successful in raids, which are going to be super duper tough, you're going to have to do at least 4 mil a minute as a DPS character, just because you have to have a certain amount of damage in order to get the dungeon done in time, because the raids are going to be on a time limit, right? So let me actually swap up my skills here for my Grand Slam build that I already had. So for my Grand Slam, I like to use pretty much all of these abilities, including Darkbreaker. Now, Darkbreaker is going to be an ability that's going to use all 10 stacks. So with using those stacks, you're kind of losing the extra damage you get from Groundbreaker because it's going to scale up based on the amount of stacks that you end up getting, right? But I found that it ends up doing a lot more damage overall so long as you can end up getting an enemy caught in the aura, because when you slam down with this move, essentially it's going to end up leaving like a cloud of darkness underneath that's going to do an additional 238%, at least for me anyways, because I got maxed out, dark damage over the course of 5 seconds. So that's 238 times 5, so long as the enemy is actually staying still. And most of the bosses don't move around that much. If you time it right, you can end up getting this move off when an enemy is just kind of stuck in it, right? And then Bloodlust you want to use most of all because this is not going to take any mana, and that's just an additional like 201% damage. And I guess I should also say to keep in mind that I actually have I'm missing 1 skill point that you can end up getting from trophies. So if you guys are level 60 and you're wondering like, how come you got more skill points than me? All you gotta do is just go to your trophies and then just filter out skill points only, and then you can actually see all of the ones that are in progress, and you just click the little checkbox here and you can see right here I've already got, here's where you get a skill point for killing 3,000 enemies, and then it's still gonna say that it's in progress even though we ended up getting that extra skill point. So there's only like a handful that I'm still using, or one that I'm still missing right now. So anyways, what we're going to be doing for this is I'm going to be using the macro so that we can have all of our abilities casting on cooldown. What you got to do when you're testing this out, by the way, you do not want to be hitting these 2 extra dummies, because otherwise it's going to pretty much triple your total DPS, and it's not really a very good way of actually detecting and checking out how much damage you're doing. So anyways, again, just to recap, we ended up doing roughly like 5.1 mil on the last Groundbreaker build, and already we're doing not too bad. You know, we're kind of almost at the halfway point and we're at like 2.5. So I mean, the thing with this build is we kind of slowly build it up just because of having to build up the stacks and stuff like that, which this, you know, this Grand Slam was better early on. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily as good as the Ground Slam anymore. Maybe we'll end up just upping the damage at the end there, but generally I found that this build was really good kind of when I had lower tiered gear, so I guess maybe it doesn't really benefit as much to end up comparing it to the other build. But anyways, there we go, we get to see end with those extra dark steps. Okay, so it ended up ironing, you know, kind of evening itself out. We're doing roughly 200k more damage, let's say, than the Groundbreaker, of course with the darkness proc on the Darkbreaker. So I guess I could call this the Darkbreaker build rather than Grand Slam, because, you know, Groundbreaker, and I know I keep saying Ground Slam and it's a little bit convoluted and confusing. So anyways, now I'm gonna swap up. This other build is, it's weird, man. It's a pretty weird one. I'm still getting used to actually playing with it myself because Void Slash is just such a weird move to actually use. But at least with this build, you get to max out your Bloodlust, which is kind of nice. And there's 2 options that you can end up going with this build. You can either end up, you know, going the way of getting rid of some of your blood price so that you can end up having some inhuman endurance, which is going to give you more resistance. And you are probably going to need that, because unless you end up having some pretty hefty armor, I mean, you can see I only have +5 on most of my armor. I'm not doing it on my pants just yet, but I'm kind of waiting for legendary armor before I bother getting the whole 10 on everything. But that's where the inhuman endurance can end up being very, very helpful, because when you get to 30% health, essentially it's going to give you a lot more defense. That said, I like being very offensive. I love the DPS type of build where I you know, just generally I like having more towards like actual just damage overall, and never mind the survivability. I guess I should also mention too, with the Grand Slam ability or Grand Slam build, because you're using Darkbreaker at 10 stacks, it's not as important to keep your 10 stacks all the time, because your Groundbreaker is going to kind of even out the rest of the build, and then you also have the Bloodlust going, so you can get a lot of life steal and a lot of survivability. Now, however, with this build, you're going to be using this pretty much anytime you end up getting weak, so the damage that we're going to be doing right now with this is obviously going to end up being a bit more than if we were actually in the field and fighting enemies, because what Blood Price is going to do is it's going to tick down our health until we get to 25%, and then it's going to stop right there and not bring our health down anymore. So obviously if you're fighting bosses, that's getting really, really risky and is very, very close to potentially being one shot. So you would be actually keeping your health up and using the Bloodlust a little bit more, which does end up negating the total amount of damage that you could end up doing with the Void Slash build here. So you get rid of Bloodlust because you don't want to use that one. You are still going to be using Darkbreaker, and then essentially essentially all you're gonna just be doing, it's very, very easy, is just using blood price on cooldown, and then using your void slash pretty much just exclusively as your main attack, and you're just going to be building up with this. Now, what Void Slash does is the initial attack is going to end up doing 410% damage, you know, and the one thing that's so weird about it and why it's, you know, such a difficult skill to kind of master is if we end up actually casting it, although it seems like we actually have most of our abilities kind of mixed up here. But if you're holding a direction while getting this ability ready, you can actually use it as a dash, and it seems to do the same amount of distance as your actual dash, which can be a problem in a lot of cases because often I'll have it where you try to use, like, just because I'm playing with a controller, it's a little bit less orthodox to use something like this because you gotta do a quick turn just to aim yourself at the enemy, and then you have to stop using your movement altogether. Now that could end up being a lot easier with a keyboard because you can just tap the key once and then you have the response time right then and there. So I'm still getting used to it on the controller, but then if you end up just standing still, you're gonna be doing this, and essentially as you carry out the combo, for, you know, what we're doing right now, this is what you're doing to build up your 10 stacks, and it's just going to be like really, really good damage over time. It's not going to give you as much mobility as the death spin. That's the other thing that I don't necessarily like about this build, is that you're pretty static, man. Like, you're pretty much just going to be standing there like a tripod, but you are going to be a death dealing monster. Like, it's like the amount of damage that you end up actually doing with this is pretty crazy compared. Oopsie daisy, stupid game. So sometimes I've noticed that where I actually took Bloodlust off, as you guys all saw, but our character still ended up actually using it as if it was on the macro, so now I gotta wait for my blood price cooldown again. The one good thing I will say, though, is because the Void Slash kind of has the same distance dash as your X Slash, like your dodge, I find that with a lot of boss enemies, you can actually dodge behind them, and then you just kind of aim towards the boss while holding your Void Slash, and then you kind of dash back towards them, and it's usually a really, really good distance between that. So anyways, let's get to it. Just start using our you know, Void Slash right here, and it's just slowly does a lot of damage over time in general, and it's a fairly simple build. Like, that I do like about it, and I mean, the thing is, the damage that you end up doing here is just so much more that it's like you have to use this. Like, it's ridiculous. So again, like I was saying, if we were in the middle of a dungeon, you know, we're starting to get dangerously low on our health, either a priest could take care of that, or we would just use our life leech. You know, obviously that would end up making our DPS a little bit lower though, so ideally you do want to have a healer. But you can see that our damage, like, we're only at the 40-second mark, and we're getting pretty up there. We already got the 4 mil going, and I mean, it's crazy to think how much more powerful this build actually is. Like, you know, I didn't want to believe it, but it's like we're already there. There we go. We're just flying past 5.5, 5.6. We're probably gonna even make it right then and there to the 6 mil mark. So even over, like, there's the Groundbreaker, which did, like, what was it, like 5.1, and then the Grand Slam did like 5.2, 5.3, or whatever it was, and now, just without question, this build ended up getting a nice even, let's just call it an even 6 mil. So that's more than 500k extra damage, that's for sure. So it's just worth doing. Now, that said, like I said, guys, this is going to be a very it's a very, like, survival, like, you're gonna be at low health, like, pretty much all the time. It kind of takes away the tankiness of the character, which I actually really like the tankiness of the Zerk. That's kind of one of the things that I like so much about him. But you're pretty much gonna have to do this if you want to be able to not only get through raids with lower tiered gear. You know, obviously, like I said, I'm rocking plus 14, so I'm fine as far as raids are concerned, but you'll just notice that if you end up swapping to this build, you're just going to generally be doing a lot better and just be able to keep up with some of the other damage characters a little bit easier and stuff like that. Well, being a little bit tankier than other characters, just because you are still going to end up having your life leech. And the thing is, it's at 10. You know, it's maxed out. So you got that sweet 43% life steal when you end up pulling your sword out of the enemy. That said, you're kind of very, very codependent on that. So RIP. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys and gals. hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Be sure to, you know, try it out yourselves. Try out some other builds. Let me know other builds in the comments, but I'd be very hard pressed to think that there's a better build than the Void Slash. In any case, hope you enjoyed. Hope you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to like, sub, hit that notification bell, and if you want to support me, you can always sponsor the YouTube channel by hitting that join button down below. Haha! Yes, money! And then otherwise, you can buy some of my merch, my real life merch. It's in the description. Or if you don't have any money and you still want to help me out, check out the link down below the Gawk box, which is a way you can donate to me for absolutely free by basically downloading and playing phone games. Sign on and stay epic, everybody.